So they have actually made a sliding retro handheld in 2025. This is the RG Slide, and it's the newest drop from Anbernic, and I actually can't believe that this thing even exists. We can actually draw this back to my favorite tech era of all time, and it's from 2004 to 2010 within the smartphone or just mobile cell phone scene. Here, before the iPhone flattened the playing field, manufacturers were just throwing everything they had at the wall. We got the weirdest, most outlandish products ever during this time period. I remember phones that flipped out. There were phones the size of lipstick casings and devices with the most bizarre silhouettes and shapes that you could even imagine. But among all of this madness, there was one shape and one kind of gimmick that really reigned supreme amongst a lot of different cell phones, and it was, of course, the sliding cell phone. These were really satisfying to hold and really fun to fidget with, and more often than not, they would just give you a keyboard underneath your phone that would slide out. This design became so popular that it even bled into the gaming world. We saw the Sony Xperia Play, which was literally just a phone that slid out to reveal hidden controllers. It was awesome. And then, of course, we have the legendary PSP Go, which wasn't a phone, but it did focus more on the gaming experience, and it did the exact same thing by sliding out and revealing all of the controls underneath. And now, after all of this wacky innovation, we are back in the present day, and what we have to show for that weird era is this monstrosity. Now, here's the issue, though. A lot of these newer form factor devices usually get called kind of gimmicky. And what happens is a lot of these devices end up looking like a prototype, and then later down the line, the company can continue to reiterate and then provide a product that actually merits and justifies the high price tag that they're asking for. So what I'm here to try and find out today is whether or not the RG Slide, that's the newest, hottest form factor on the block, is super gimmicky and just relies on that for you to get out your wallet, or if this thing actually delivers not only with the fun new form factor, but also with the controls and the overall gaming experience. The build quality and how this device feels is obviously one of the most, if not the most, intriguing aspects. It's kind of insane because this almost camouflages itself in front of the camera. It just looks super weird, and in photos and videos, I don't think you really get a proper understanding or grasp of just how big and chunky it is. It towers over the sliding phones that I have in my collection and kind of makes you realize, wait, this is not something that's supposed to fit into your pocket. It looks super ugly until you decide to actually slide it out and reveal all of those amazing sleek looking controls hiding underneath. The sliding mechanism itself is actually really smooth and satisfying. It genuinely reminds me a lot of the older sliding phones, but just in a more substantial and bigger way. It doesn't feel cheap when you slide it open, and it's actually on the smoother side whenever you do pop it open. And I do think Anbernic did such a great job with this being the first rendition. And since this isn't a clamshell, you'll definitely want to put on the screen protector that thankfully Anbernic does ship with the device. So, you know, you're in this weird middle ground where it's not a clamshell, so it doesn't cover the screen, but you are getting the controls protected. So we're in this awkward, like, in between, where if you don't like clamshells, this could actually be a great option for you if you still want some form of protection. The controls themselves are some of my favorite that we have seen from Anbernic. It's really refreshing that they didn't prioritize thin buttons to make the device super small and sleek. Most of the time with certain clamshells or sliding mechanisms, the buttons are thinner so that they can actually fit everything in there whenever it's closed, but Anbernic just went the opposite route, and they just decided to make this thing as chunky as possible so that they didn't have to jeopardize any of the controls, which is very much appreciated here. We've got a large D-pad that's pretty firm, but definitely that same Anbernic style that we've seen in something like the RG40 XXV, or maybe even the XX Pro has this similar firm but still accurate D-pad. The buttons are mushier as well, but do feel great, and it's full-sized buttons that aren't like recessed all the way back into the shell, which, like I said, is very appreciated here. The thumbsticks are on the smaller side, but there's no cardinal snapping, and overall feel smooth despite them being smaller. The trigger buttons on the back are the only clicky part about this device, and I think they're probably the most cheap feeling buttons on here, but they still do get the job done. And I guess with this form factor, I don't know what else anbernic was really supposed to do, and they absolutely still fit the bill. The screen is where things get extremely interesting. This is a 4.7-inch LCD panel with a 4:3 aspect ratio sitting at 1280 by 960, which is an absolute banger. I love 4:3 screens on a handheld. It just fits so many different systems, and this is also one of the biggest, if not, I think the biggest 4:3 screen we've seen in a retro handheld. So everything like N64, GameCube, a lot of SNES looks fantastic on here, Sega Saturn, Dreamcast, they are blown up, but still have a really nice aspect ratio. It fits perfectly to the screen. You're not getting huge bezels, and I don't know, man, this screen is kind of crazy. And the real sauce that anbernic just drizzled on top of this meal is the fact that it's got 120 hertz refresh rate. And with 120 frames, like everybody's been saying about this thing, you can now use BFI, which is black frame insertion. And if you've never heard of BFI, essentially what this does is it just alternates between the game and a black frame. And so that kind of emulates what it's like to play on a CRT. And so it's supposed to help with a lot of the blurring with older retro games, especially pixelated games. So therefore it feels more like you're playing on an actual CRT. This really does make things a lot smoother. When I take off BFI, I absolutely notice it right away, and this has become my preferred way to play retro games if I have that option available. And so everything kind of looks like a perfect package here with this screen that we've not seen before from anbernic. However, it's just so unfortunate that the colors on this are extremely dull, in my opinion. I think we've been getting spoiled a lot from the OLED screens that we've seen on multiple different devices as of late, especially in this price point. And I even think for an LCD screen, these colors just are not hitting that same level of contrast and saturation that I would like to see in my retro handheld, at least in 2025. The weight on the device is also a bit awkward whenever you're playing. It's super top heavy, so holding it feels kind of disproportional because the screen is just gonna fall more if you let go of the bottom controls by any means. To get nitpicky, I'm also not the biggest fan of these anbernic D-pads. I know a lot of people love them, but for me, it's not my cup of tea, to be honest. And speaking about the D-pad, I think the ergonomics when you're playing D-pad centric games are actually really awkward, and I found myself just wanting to use the thumbsticks more often than actually using my left thumb to play with the D-pad. When it comes to performance, this thing is like a 4:3 monster. It doesn't absolutely knock out of the park every 4:3 system, but it definitely covers a lot of territory here. It efficiently caps out at GameCube, and then once you get into the PS2 level, it starts to slow down a bit. You might run into some titles that are giving you slower performance, or you have to lower the internal resolution or play at the base resolution. But for GameCube and lower, I was playing at 2 to 3x resolution and having a great time. Things look fantastic because it's the native resolution and it fills up the whole screen. If you're looking for something that will sail through PS2 super easily and you don't want to tinker around too much, this thing would probably give you a lot of issues, and I wouldn't recommend it. N64 was a slapper on here, and it just looks so good, and it's just making me love 4:3 even more. This is my first really big premium 4:3 device, so I'm starting to understand the hype train. Most of my like higher end emulation devices have all been 16:9, so now I'm starting to dabble into the 4:3 a bit more. That's on this level where it can emulate GameCube, and I gotta say, I'm a fan. GBA also caught me off guard because this is the black model, so the bezels aren't really noticeable. And while it's not an OLED screen, it still just blends into the color of the exterior, so you don't even notice that there's black bars for the most part and just think that's how big the screen is. And I had a great time. This is running Android, which I think is a big turnoff for a lot of people because it's not an easy setup process. You don't just order this, it shows up at your doorstep and you're ready to go. You've got to watch tutorials, you've got to tinker around and mess with things, and if you've never set up an Android handheld before, you're probably going to be sinking like a good couple of hours just to get things how you like it. Anbernic does send this with some pre-installed emulators, but I would recommend just wiping all of it and, to be honest, starting fresh, because sometimes they'll give you outdated software or it's not the version that you actually want. So you can use something like Obtainium to download a lot of the modern and newer and newest updated emulators so that you're up and running and actually using the proper software. For my front end, I am in fact a hipster and I don't use ESDE. Instead, instead I use Beacon, which to me is the best looking one. It's a couple of bucks on the Google Play Store, and it's absolutely worth it. I think that this should be the most popular one because I think it organizes the ROM, scrapes the box art, the way that you navigate the menu. It all comes together to feel like a great console experience. And you all know that I love getting the maximum amount of use out of these beautiful little retro handheld emulators that run Android, which means you could use things like the Kindle app and just start reading a book on here while using the controls to swap pages. This one isn't as comfortable and the screen isn't as ideal for reading, but it still works and you can use the D-pad to swap between your pages. We got the classic Anki test too, making sure we can run through some flashcards, and you can use this as a dedicated learning device. You could download Duolingo. You can do whatever you want, man. You've got access to the Play Store, and I'm sure that there's even more weird use cases out there. If you use one of these Android handhelds for something that's not just emulation that I haven't mentioned, please let me know. I'm really interested to see what you guys are up to on these things, man. It's crazy. And because it's a 4x3 screen, you can watch old television shows on this thing, and it will give you a lot of nostalgia, and it will look so satisfying. I would only do this on a plane or while I'm traveling, but regardless, it still looks so sick. I got Cowboy Bebop on here, and it looks really vintage and yet modern at the same time, and it's this weird feeling of like the futuristic tech world while also giving me a bit of nostalgia. The main kicker with this device though, in my opinion, is just the price tag. This thing is sitting at around $185, sometimes $190, which is definitely on the higher end. And depending on where you live, you're also going to pay for shipping. So whenever I went to the checkout with the RG Slide, it was asking for about $212, $220. And it's at the point where I would consider this to be a pricey handheld. And if it was $165, $170, it would be a much easier recommend. Unless you're somebody who's like, I need the PSP Go form factor in modern day, then yeah, this could be something that you'd enjoy. But even then, the ironic part is that this doesn't actually have the PSP native resolution on the screen. It's a 4x3 and it doesn't actually match or even look great for PSP games. So it's kind of this give and take that you would be playing if you wanted to purchase this. I don't know, it's weird. The RG Slide sits in this awkward middle ground yet again. Anbernic are really good at making devices that are kind of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and a little bit of something random that you didn't expect. In this case, you've got something that's really unique with also a brand new screen that we've yet to see before with black frame insertion options as well. But the ergonomics are slightly lacking and the controls are very preference-based. I'm not sure how many of you truly like the Anbernic controls. The power does also cap out around PS2, which isn't the same for the RP5 and the RP Flip 2, which are slightly more powerful. And this brings us to the conclusion. Now that we've looked at all the alternatives, we've seen what it can do, we've seen how it feels and how this chunky hamburger actually operates. And for the most part, I'd say Anbernic kind of killed this for a first iteration of a sliding retro handheld. The sliding mechanism, while loud, does feel great, and you know, we can't say for certain how long something like this would last. I don't see it breaking anytime soon, at least with the amount of times that I have actually just been doing this the whole time. So the initial question I had coming into this was, is this just too gimmicky and it relies too much on that to actually sell the device, or is this a solid retro handheld? And I'm happy to report that I do think that this is a solid retro handheld. It does hit all of the boxes. It's not just super gimmicky, and it doesn't feel like a first iteration device of that form factor. But yeah, man, this has been really fun to tinker with. I'm still left slightly confused on this device as a whole, and in a good way. I think I'm leaning towards the positivity for sure, but time will tell whether or not this thing really holds up well and how great that sliding form factor is for most of you. But anyway, that's gonna be it. I appreciate all of you guys for watching. Thank you for tapping in with me once again to check out the goofy retro handheld scene, because things are moving and they're always innovating, and I can't wait to see what other crazy devices are on the chopping block next.
I could see the whole future from right where I'm sitting. The ball's main stage in the village still hitting. The odds stay in the game, but I'm still trying to sub it. In my dreams exhale to more to make a living. Tight funds on my back, burning cash.